Jocie, just because everyone corrects me and says my name's Jocie when I introduce myself. Like the guy downstairs.
Oh,
I was like, I'm Jocie. He said, Jocie. I was like, no, Jocie. Jess. And I was like, okay, fine. So it is Jocie, but I should really let it go. I'm going to show you my show reel so you can get a sense of the kind of stuff that I do. Every time I show you something. So I went to Kingston. I did illustration and animation, and I really liked the course in itself, but one of the things that I liked the most about it was the fact that it kind of was a course to teach you how to direct. So it didn't really matter what you were doing as long as you had some concept and you could explain yourself. Like, there I'm dressed up as a doorknob, and it was so hot, and I nearly had a panic attack in that costume. It was really horrible. But I had a reason for being in it, so that the tutors liked it. And this was a stop motion thing about shaving. I also just played with jelly for ages. Like, it didn't really matter what we were coming out with as long as there was something going on behind it. And it was also where I made my degree film called Fractured, which was about a woman who breaks into pieces when she gets anxious. I wanted it to be fairly open, so at the time I kind of said, have your own take on it. But whenever she goes out, and when people touch her or when someone talks to her or something happens, she starts kind of shattering into little pieces. And it was the first time that I'd tried making something about kind of sensitive issues and like mental health. And also it was personal for me because I had so much anxiety at uni, and so it was a really kind of interesting time for me to be exploring something really personal and something quite difficult. And that's where I realised how much I like directing, and that for me telling a story is like the most fun bit of doing animation. So about a year out of uni, I got asked to do a video for the School of Life, which I think is a pretty common one to be asked to do, and they're like crappy budgets, but really, really great things to work on because I had complete creative freedom, which was what I dreamt of since I left uni. And I was asked to do a piece about anger, which was specifically how not to be angry, and why if you're too optimistic, you might end up being really, really miserable. And so I had to animate this guy getting angry. It was all about, I can't remember what his name is anymore, but it was all about how he gets really angry when loads of little things happen. But I realised that animating an angry person is really hard, and takes loads of time, and is way too personal. So I decided to turn him into this angry blob, and every time something bad happened to him, he kind of exploded into this spiky, angry object. And that was a way that actually I was able to kind of create a whole film about anger without having to get into some really tough, nitty-gritty character animation, and keep it a little bit more symbolic. So I started thinking, okay, this is how I can use concepts in my work to tell a story more clearly. And also, when you're doing something on your own, animation takes ages, right? And you can't do something really complex. You've got to find kind of shortcuts, sadly. So I did that film. My favourite thing about it probably was the YouTube comments. considering it was about not getting angry about stuff, I think that this video is so pessimistic, it makes me angry. This video made me very angry. I thought you were going to shout, you wasted my time. This made me even more angry, and then I'm angry just because this was a waste of my time. I feel like they didn't watch it. They really didn't take the message, but that's fine. They should just watch it again. So I finished that job, and I was really pleased that I'd done something that was entirely kind of in a style I wanted to try, but then I realised that directing just has too many options. You can do anything, especially the sort of briefs I'm getting. They come to me with a narrative and a script, and then kind of say, okay, do what you think's best, which is amazing, but also terrifying, way too open. So I remembered the importance of the concept. I use concepts kind of to create rules for myself, because if I'm just told I can do anything, that completely throws me off and I have no clue how to make a film. But if I can take the content and the message and the tone of what's being said, and then find kind of reasons for working in a certain way, then I actually have a way better kind of point to navigate how on earth you come up with a storyboard and characters and colours and all of that. So I'm going to talk about a handful of my projects, but I'm going to talk about them from the perspective of what was the brief and how I used the concepts that I came up with to help me tackle these really open briefs. This was a film that I did with the Royal Society of Arts, and it was a piece of audio from Simon Sinek, who you may know. He's a public speaker who did a viral video about millennials not that long ago. You can definitely go and get water, we won't mind. And I can turn this off if it's annoying anyone. Is it good? Anyone turn? Okay. Don't worry, you can leave and come back, it's fine. Or come. So he made this viral video once about millennials, which I also did some animation for. But this was an extract which was a lot less kind of sexy as a brief. The brief was the benefits of consistent actions over intense actions. Which, when I first kind of listened to the script, I thought, oh my god, how can I ever make that interesting? This is so wordy. I can't even read. I actually can't read that sentence because my mind just shuts off halfway through. But I was determined that I was going to find a really fun way of approaching it. So I thought about what he was saying, and I realised that he was splitting his opinions. It's all about how kind of to behave in relationships, in work environments, throughout life. And he was splitting it into two different options. You have big, bold actions, and then you have repetitive, smaller actions. So a big, bold action is going to the dentist for 8 hours and having half your teeth removed and then bleached and reordered and put back in, and that's an intense action, which has a big impact, but is not the best way to look after your teeth. And then there's the smaller actions, which is just brushing your teeth twice a day for 2 minutes. And actually, that's a kind of better thing to do, right? And I could see these two different things, and I decided I would make the actual animation reflect, and the techniques that I used reflect that theme. So everything that was represented by an intense action, I made it colourful and bold, but I only animated every 6 frames, so that it in itself was intense and it was kind of not repetitively animated. And then everything that was representing consistent action, it was just line work, but I animated it on 2s, it was kind of more smooth, and I put that kind of consistent, repetitive action into actually animating it. And so using that as a theme really helped me to figure out how on earth I was going to make a project. And then I did a storyboard. My storyboards are super crappy looking, and I always see other people's storyboards and I can't believe how professional they are. But this is the sort of thing that I start off with, and that's how I get my head around this kind of big thing. I just jot down stuff and don't worry about how it looks. I did need to net up when I sent it to the client. So this is what they got, but it's still not like Hannah's, and the storyboards from last week were very beautiful, very professional looking. But my clients are happy enough with that. And then I did an animatic, as you guys all know. Normally I wouldn't work in colour, but because of the content of this piece, I actually did some of it in colour. And I'll show you a bit of the animatic.
Great culture, no matter where we are, no matter how big the organization, is not about intensity, it's about consistency. You can't get into shape by going to the gym for 9 hours. It won't work. But if you work out every single day for 20 minutes, you will absolutely get into shape. Right? Intensity is like going to the dentist.
So from there, we just animated it. And I thought, Emma's not here who helped me, but I had someone helping me on this project, which is always fantastic.
Right? Intensity is like going to the dentist. It's fixed in time, we know exactly what date we're going, we know how long we're going to be there, and we know that when we come out, our teeth will feel smooth and look perfect. But if that's all we do, all our teeth will fall out. In other words, intensity is not enough. So we're also supposed to brush our teeth twice a day for 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening. What does brushing your teeth do for 2 minutes? Nothing. It does absolutely nothing. Unless you do it every single day. Can you leave out a day? Sure. How many days can you leave out? I don't really know. How many times do you have to brush your teeth before work? I don't know that either.
I feel like that film also taught me some good messages about trying to repeatedly make small efforts towards things, which I don't know if I do, but I took something good from that. So from that film, I then was asked to work on an episode of the Colorscope series from CNN, and I was so excited because it was a huge client and I'd never worked on something with that kind of size client before. But again, my brief was kind of challenging. It was to make a white film about the colour white, which I really thought, how am I going to tackle this in an interesting way? But I started listening to the brief and I did a bit of research about the colour white. The speaker, I can't remember the name, maybe James Fox, who narrates the project, actually has a kind of whole series about colour and even has an hour-long documentary about the colour white, which is really interesting. So I kind of looked into the theme and I decided that it felt like white was kind of elusive. It was, it's a kind of a non-colour, and I started to think of it as something that is never actually there but always being revealed by something else. So I decided to work through the script and the pictures that he was talking about and then just imagine the white so that it would never really be the object, but it would always be revealed by something else. So it might be the reflection in a glass that just shows you a glimpse of a wedding dress as someone's cheersing, or it was a skeleton that a ray of light illuminated. It's the makeup that's been put on the face but not the actual face. It's the toothpaste coming out of the tube rather than the jar of toothpaste. And the jar of toothpaste. And that helped me, again, to take this completely ambiguous brief and actually have a way of getting my head around it. This is the animatic I sent to CNN. Can you believe that? It's really hideous, but again, they got enough of my idea, so it was fine. And it didn't always, the concept, I couldn't always kind of keep it in each shot. So sometimes I just had to draw the thing. There was no way I could kind of come up with an interesting way of showing it. But having that was my kind of structure whilst I was making it. I'll show you another little clip.
Virtually whiten our phones and add fluorescent chemicals to clothes, paper, and even toothpaste, which is why they tend to glow in the dark. The world's whitest white belongs to the shell of a beetle. Some white substances have a dark side. Limestone is made from the skeletons of dead sea creatures. Japanese geishas were once poisoned by lead-white makeup. And an estimated 100 African elephants are killed every single day for their white ivory.
Which is very sad. True. So between projects, and especially before these two projects, I was doing a little bit of freelancing, but I wasn't getting a huge amount of work that was my kind of dream work, or I wasn't being asked to direct in the styles that I had wanted to direct prior to these two films. And so I decided to try in my spare time to make some really short little animations in the style that I would like to be asked to make work in. I mean, they were literally kind of 5-second GIFs. but it was really kind of fun for me to try something that visually I actually liked. And if it's only 5 seconds, then you can make it complex. You can add in a ton of textures and colours because you don't have to do very much work. And also it was a good way of practicing my character animation, my composition. It's now at the end of my emails, so you know I got that out of it as well. And then this piece, again, maybe this one took me a few days. She said to me that she'd kind of seen some of my work and liked a bit of it, but actually it was just this little video that I'd made, that when she saw that on my website, that was the reason that she gave me the job. So it wasn't the bigger projects that I'd done, it was small things that kind of showed something where I pushed myself and it had maybe more of my own kind of personal voice. So last year, I was asked to direct a piece for the New York Times for their Conception series, and that I was just so excited to be asked to work on that, because I'd seen the previous series and I just thought they were incredible. And this brief, again, was a really kind of sensitive one. It was to visualise a mother's concerns about raising a black son in Chicago, which I knew that I needed to kind of do this justice, but in a really sensitive way. So I listened to the audio I was given, and also it was based on a kind of 2-hour interview that the mother did with the producer. And I listened to the interview, and I talked to the producer, and we felt that there were kind of two realities in the words that she talked about. There was the one side, which is her hopes and dreams for her son and his kind of glittering potential, and it was just vibrant and full of love, and it was exciting and just colourful in the way that she spoke about it. And then there was her fears and a lot of the realities that she felt he was faced with, and they were sad, and it was hard to listen to. And so we decided to go for these 2 different kind of worlds within the animation: the colourful potential and the hopes and the dreams, and then her fears, which were grayscale and more muted. And again, we used that as the kind of starting point to find a way to tackle something that's really difficult to even talk about, let alone visualise. I really tried to think about a lot of potential ways to represent stuff in this project. I think especially when you're talking about difficult things and very personal things, to be metaphorical is really helpful, and not to be too specific, especially when you're talking about people. So I kind of explored as many different options as I could, and then really looked at the concept designs. I started to think about how the kid can maybe kind of have like colours glistening through his fingers, and when he touches things, they changed colour, because I wanted to show her just the kind of the variety of the options that she saw in her son, and the kind of potential that she saw him as having. And then I wanted to go for this really tonal kind of grayscale, painterly quality for the other side of the world. I feel like when you're doing concept designs, it's really hard to then translate that into the final animation, to keep that kind of looseness. It's not something that I've figured out how to do yet, but nonetheless I kind of tried to enjoy the concept designs and know that maybe if you're aiming for something, you're going to get to a certain standard of what you were hoping for. And I worked on some different concept, character designs. I ended up keeping their faces quite blank. I think, again, don't go too specific, in my opinion, when you're working on really personal stuff, because I don't think you need to kind of, I think leaving something to the imagination can be as powerful as trying to animate it accurately. And then I realised I couldn't draw babies, which was a bit of a moment. But I practiced, and I got better at drawing babies, and trying to figure out how they walk and move. I don't know any babies, so I don't have a lot of experience, but we got there in the end. I'll show you.
It's not like the young man I see standing on the bus stop catching the bus to school, or in their football uniforms. I'm like, that's going to be my young boy, my son. I was just so shocked when I saw him. with his little hands and his head full of hair. But I knew that reality was now in full effect. This is it. Now let's start getting to work. I read about raising successful Black boys. Keep them busy, know their friends, feed them well, be a two-parent family home. I've asked a lot of single mothers who I knew, how do they raise successful Black boys? They give me the same advice.
So I would definitely suggest watching all the films in that series as well, because they're voices that I think it's just so wonderful that they were heard and they were visualised so well by all the audio animators. All my recent projects, I've been trying to read up about the subject and learn a bit more and educate myself about what I'm talking about. And I like to listen to a lot of talks and kind of read some articles around the subject. But so on another project as well, I've got another reading for you, in case you like it. But this one, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Renia de Lodge, was just a fantastic book. And I felt it was just helpful for me reading that and kind of getting a different perspective. So yeah, I can't recommend enough a book, but also like looking for some other voices when you're kind of working with sensitive, interesting stuff. After that film, I got to work on a really fun, silly project. This was a film about evil, and it was a book trailer for a woman called Julia Shaw, who I've worked on another book trailer for. The brief was essentially to communicate in a book trailer what is evil and are we all evil, which I'm starting to think maybe we are. I had this kind of instinct with this project to go like really messy and painterly. I was also feeling a bit overwhelmed from the New York Times job of being at a computer and working on something that had really taken so much time just to make, but also emotionally kind of taken a lot out of me, and I just wanted to like go and paint for ages. So I did. And I had the best 2 weeks ever, just sat at home painting with ink and a bit of gouache. It was also the week that Anita works in the same studio as me, and it was that week last summer where it was so hot that you could barely breathe. And my Cintiq had like turned into a radiator, I could barely touch it. So I left and I went home and I just painted, and it was really fun. I knew again that there was no way I was going to get these exact visuals when it came down to animating. But I decided to ignore that kind of, how am I going to animate this fear, and just explore the different visuals. Also, I got to put some cats in, which is always a plus. I get treated like I'm a crazy cat lady, but I'm not. I just like putting cats in animation with it. I think that the snake men were actually my favourite illustrations, but they ended up being probably the hardest ones to colour. Natasha's eyebrows, who helped me on the project, just went. So one of the things with this project, visually there was quite a strong reason behind it. I knew I wanted ink and I wanted it to look as messy and inky as possible. But for the actual story, I didn't have a huge kind of concept running through it, because the book was full of so many great visuals. So it's pretty much just like a list of weird, creepy, entertaining things when you're reading it from, the kind of perspective of trying to get a film out of it. There was like people peeing on graves, voodoo dolls, people who are actually secretly monsters, killing insects for enjoyment, creepy laughter. There was just all these things as I was reading the book. I was like, okay, that makes a great image, that makes a great image. So I pretty much just put them in a big list and then figured out how to morph between them. And then I had the task of trying to figure out how I was going to turn it into an animation, because I realised I couldn't do it as an ink drawing, because I would have needed 5 times the amount of time to figure out how to do that. So I made this Photoshop version. That's the original, and that's the Photoshop one. And when I did that, I was pretty pleased with it. I thought, okay, this is like looking pretty good. It's looking quite similar to the original drawing. But when it came down to animating, I just couldn't keep it. I couldn't keep it at that same level. So I ended up kind of compromising and finding a middle ground Some bits to me look very, very computer made. Some bits have a bit more of an inky feel. I think as a freelance director, I was working on my own, but I had Natasha and another person helping with cleanup. You can't, maybe if you're a whole studio, you have the ability to really push the style and figure out how to get this exact visual. But on your own, it just wasn't really possible. So this is where I got to, and I still feel like pleased with the kind of the visual outcome, but there's always more, and I think if you did it again, it would look even more like ink.
Evil. But it's time to dissect evil. You see, our reactions to deviance may tell us less about others and more about ourselves. In 1881, philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote that thinking evil means making evil. He argued that evil is a subjective experience, not something that's inherent to a person or object or action. Taking this further, when we look at the science of evil,
So I read quite a lot about this one. This is actually a book, which I am not paid to promote it in any way, but I think it's such a good book, so I would really recommend it. And then The Memory Illusion is her previous book, which I also did a trailer for, and that's about memory science and a little bit about kind of criminal, what's the word? It's not criminal science, it's when people are like made to confess things that didn't even happen, which happens all the time. And the fact that basically you can make anyone remember anything, and you can trick people very, very easily into believing things that didn't happen, and even remembering things. So that's a really interesting book. And then these two, I'm just really interested in psychopaths. I think that's so fascinating. The Psychopath Test is a great book about psychopaths, which some of you read, really entertaining. And then Confessions of a Sociopath is a good one, but knowing it's written by a sociopath who is under a fake name, you can't tell if you like it because it's all weird and juicy and they're being a sociopath, or if they're acting like that to get a response from you. So you start kind of voting. But it's a really good book. So every now and then, another kind of way that I try and keep myself animating and keep myself creatively active is by drawing moments in my life. Sometimes they're the moments that I found funny, sometimes they're the things that really irritated me, but I just find it's a little therapeutic way of recording stuff, like my cat trying to do yoga with me, my boyfriend not paying attention. And recently I decided to do one of those as an animation. What I would like to do is maybe make it into a series, so loads of just 10-second animation about moments. Never know, you can piece them together and make a film, might be an easier one. But it depends on whether I actually do it. That was a response to my Facebook being hacked and all my friends being deleted, which was so annoying, and I couldn't get into my Facebook for 3 weeks. That was how I felt. So I took out my anger and I knew that at least I got something out of it. So things that may be good for you, / tips and advice. Make work in your downtime. That's what's got me a lot of the work that I've got. And I think it keeps you kind of interested in what you're doing and why you're an animator and you wanted to do it. Look at the bigger picture. Does that look like a pie? I labelled it in case you couldn't tell. But think about so look at the bigger picture. That means think about your work and yourself as a whole on one side. So I try and think of myself as Jocie Juritz as a brand. And if Jocie Juritz was a brand, what would that stand for? What would the values of that be? What kind of work would that want to produce? And what tone would that want to have? So when I'm on Instagram or my website or doing whatever, I'm just kind of having in the back of my mind, what am I aiming for and what is the kind of the goal and the route that I would like to be going down? But also, look at the bigger picture and remember why you did it in the first place. Like, to be an animator or to be a creative is such an amazing, privileged position that we get to just make stuff all day. Kind of, you know, we get to do such creative stuff, and you probably got into it because you loved it. And I think remembering that is so fantastic, because then you kind of remember, okay, actually, I've got this amazing opportunity. I might as well work this to get the most out of it. If I can spend all my time telling stories and communicating, then why not try and tell the stories that I care about and have an impact in a way that I want to. Like, for me, I think talking about educating in kind of psychological issues is what really interests me. Maybe your why is like you just love character animation and you want to add this huge impact to other films. There could be like a range of reasons why for you, but I think to keep that in your mind is really important. And then most importantly, get hobbies, exercise a bit, probably more than a bit, but I mean, I'm not an exercise freak, so see friends and eat well. Just don't burn out. There's no point. Nothing is worth it.